Hello and welcome, this is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm sharing a stitched chicken card. I'm using the Felt Stitch Hen die set from Spellbinders. This is a new die set. There is this particular one and then one that has a rabbit and a carrot. I'm choosing to do this one and I'm doing it on a card but with some printed paper rather than the felt. You can easily do this or use this die set with the felt, and Spellbinders has a variety of different felt color choices to choose from. I'm using some Just Saying printed paper. This is a 6-inch printed paper package. I've used it in a video before and I just love all the bright, fun spring colors. Now, because I'm doing some stitching on these die sets, this particular printed paper is fairly thin. So I'm adding a little bit of Hammermill Cardstock on the back. I'm using my liquid glue to glue it in place, making sure that I'm very liberal with that glue, and then put my acrylic block on it, set it aside, and wait till it's totally dry before I do my die cutting. Now, if I were to be stitching this with felt, I obviously wouldn't be gluing things together with this, but because I am making a card with it and stitching cardstock, I don't need to see both sides to it. So I don't need to make sure that both sides are absolutely perfect. I am gluing the layers together so that I can stitch them all at once. There's no point in repeating the same thing if a piece is going to be layered on top of that. The wing has 3 different pieces here, and I was about to glue that smallest one on, but then I realized there was that little scallop at the bottom there that actually didn't go all the way through the different layers. So I'm just going to stitch that scallop line in place before adding it to the other layers and then stitching those all together. So anytime I'm doing some stitching, I will take my threads, and I use 2 threads of the floss, and I tape it towards the back where the ends aren't going to show, and then do a running stitch. And by running stitch, I mean I go up one hole, down the next one, up the next one, down the next one, and then once I get to the end, I will go back and fill all of the other holes. Another option would be to do, I think it's called back stitch, where you go up one, down the other, then go up the next one, but back through the previous hole so that you fill everything in as you're going. And either one of those methods would work for what I'm doing here. Sometimes the running stitch is just the easiest one and it always works out. You can't tell the difference because we're only looking at the front. If we were to be doing this on felt, I would definitely be doing the running stitch method, because if you do the back stitch, then it makes a weird look on the back and you don't see the continuous line through it. Another thing with felt is you do need to be a little bit more gentle with your stitching. We don't want to tear out the felt because it's a little bit delicate. You do need to be a bit more gentle with your stitching, whereas when you're stitching cardstock, you don't have to be quite as gentle with it. So once I have all of my layers here glued together, I can easily go through all of them and do all of that stitching at once. If I were to do them in separate layers, which is possible, it would just require a little bit more stitching, then it's going to add a little bit more dimension when I glue those layers together at the end, and I don't really want that dimension for the look that I'm going for. Now, I'm choosing 3 different colors of the printed papers for my chicken, and then I've chosen a 4th for my background. So all of those printed papers are in that Just Saying printed paper pack. I'm not doing all of my stitching on camera because it does get fairly repetitive and there's no point in watching the same thing over and over. It'd be as exciting as watching paint dry. So I'm only using 1 color of floss here. This one is number 961 of DMC. It's kind of a darker pink. It's the same color as Dahlia cardstock, and this is one that I've used quite a bit. Again, I'm only using 2 ply of that floss. You could use more if you wanted your thread to be thicker. I find that 2 is the perfect amount for me. When I pick my flosses, I just typically will choose a color that works well for the different colors that I'm using. Sometimes I'll do different colors on the one design. For this, I liked the 1 floss for all of the different cardstock colors. And I thought by adding too many colors to it, because I already had several different printed papers, I thought it would just be a little bit too busy for that. Anytime I happen to start having my floss start to twist on each other, all you have to do is hold that floss by the needle and then just dangle the piece underneath it, whatever you're stitching, and it will automatically untangle itself. Anytime I come to the end of my piece of floss, I will take that same tape, and I'm just using Best Ever Craft tape here, just the thin one. I will just take a small piece of it and I will tape that floss to the back and then snip it with my detail scissors and then start again with a new piece of floss. So once I do all of my stitching, and I do most of the rest of it off screen, I will start to assemble my card. Now, by this time, my Hammermill cardstock on the back of that printed paper is done, so I'm ready to cut that chick out. The rest of my die cutting I did off screen, again, because it's the same thing over and over again, so we don't need to see the same thing. But what I wanted to show was how I did it. So typically when I do my die cutting, I will have the die above the cardstock, but with this, because we have all those teeny tiny little holes, I flipped my plates around so that the cardstock was above the die. When you're die cutting, the pressure is really from the top part of your machine, so you get a lot more precision and a lot more pressure if you flip your die over and have the paper on top of it. And I wanted to make sure that each and every single one of those holes got cut, especially because you could see when I was doing my die cutting that my plates are very well used. And often when they're very well used, sometimes they get a little bit more difficult when cutting some detailed dies. This was not a problem. By flipping that over, I had no problem cutting through all those layers, and I could easily use a die pick to pick all of those pieces out. And I always use my die pick to pick those pieces out before I start stitching. I added that crown to the top of the chicken before doing that stitching on the top because I wanted, again, to do that stitching all at once rather than repeat it. Now you can see that there is an area to do the stitching for the wing, and I could have done that outline stitching on the wing and stitched it right to the chicken. I opted to do my stitching on that wing all on its own. So when I go to glue it on my chicken, it has just a little bit more dimension to it. If you wanted to, you could easily just stitch it right to the wing area on the chicken and leave that. But you do want to do all of the little scallop or all of the different layered inside pieces of that stitching before doing the outline right on that chicken. So I did most of my stitching on the outside of the chicken off screen. I'm just doing the finishing little bits where I'm doing that running stitch and I'm just filling in those areas. And once again, once I get to the end, which is going to be about where we get to the crown, I will put my floss on the back of that cardstock and use that Best Ever Craft tape just to tape it in place before trimming off the excess that is left on my needle. And often I just keep that thread on my needle, so then next time I'm stitching, maybe I'm using that color, maybe I'm not. I have several different needles and I'll just pick and choose which one has the floss color that I want to work with. So before I assemble this onto my card, I'm just adding that little wing on there. This die set die cuts 2 eyes for the chicken as well as a little beak, so you could put them how it is on the front of the package. I opted to just use one of those eyes and then the beak on the end of or the edge of that chicken to do a side profile. And I just like the look of that a little bit better with this printed cardstock, and mainly because the color, the cardstock that, or the printed paper that I die cut the eyes out of had polka dots in it. One of them came out pink, one of them came out blue, and I thought it would look a little bit funny to have 2 different eye colors. This I thought worked absolutely perfect, and I just love the final effect of it, and I think it really suits it. There are a couple little trim pieces that I glued on there once again before adding it to my card. Now I'm using a white card base here. This is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I'm taking one of the stamps from the Spring Chicken Stamp and Die Set, and I'm going to stamp that on the inside of the card. This just adds a fun sentiment, and these are all chicken themed sentiments, so it's just a fun way to stamp something inside that coordinates well with it. Again, you could easily use like a spring stamp. You could use a sentiment die for the front of it if you wanted to. I kind of thought with all of the different printed paper and the stitching that I didn't really want to add anything to the front of the card. I wanted to leave that just with the stitched chicken and the printed paper background and have that stamp sentiment on the inside. So I used my Misti stamping tool to help me stamp that, and I stamped it with some warm lipstick distress ink, which coordinates with the color of floss that I was using. I have my piece of printed paper for the front of that card there. It was trimmed down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. So I glued that down there, put my acrylic block on there to hold that in place while I added some glue to the chicken, and then added the chicken to the front of the card. The last step here is just inserting that tail part there and letting that all dry together. Now the front of the packaging for the Felt Stitch Hen has some different detailed dies that cut out these little circles, and I just liked those details on there, but I didn't really want them out of cardstock. I thought it was still going to be a little bit flat if it was just cardstock. So this is a perfect place to add some little rhinestone gems. So I'm using some Prism AB gems here. They worked perfectly with the colors that I was using. These gems come in many different colors. I chose to use all the same color for this simply because I didn't want to add any more color with it. I thought it was busy enough with the different patterns that I didn't want to add more busyness by using different colored gems. Now I opted to only put those gems in the middle of those little strip pieces there, but you could also add some to the wings if you wanted and add a little bit of that sparkle there. But I thought it was the best or the great or a nice final touch for that chicken, just adding that little bit of sparkle. So here is the final card, and it was really easy to do. The longest thing that took, or the thing that took it the longest, was stitching that chicken, but even that didn't really take that long. Just a fun and different way to create a spring chicken card. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time that you spend with me. I hope you have a fantastic day.